أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقال الله تعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل بدعة ضلالة. A couple of months ago, I started a series of khutbah with respect to the 4 tasks of anyone who is a da'i, who is a speaker, who is a leader in a community, in an organization, or in any leadership position. And the 4 tasks, the first of one which we discussed a couple of months ago was the task of becoming an active listener. The second one which we will be discussing today, inshallah, is the task of becoming an effective speaker. It will be from both Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he spoke. The third is the task of becoming an active thinker. And the fourth is the task of making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because for anything, we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So today we'll be talking about the task of speaking. And this requires a lot of skills when it comes to public speaking. Many major corporations, pharmaceutical companies and others spend a lot of time, effort and money in training their people in the task of speaking. Because the ability to speak and the ability to communicate effectively are the things that distinguish human species from any other animals. And as I had mentioned before as well in Surah Rahman, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ وَعَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ, He taught him the ability of bayan. The bayan is communication. When we communicate with others, it is through several means. The most important obviously is the speaker, the listener, and the medium between the two is the spoken word. So if you look at our religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the speaker, Quran is the kalamullah, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are the listeners. So we try to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means. He chose the medium of words. But He did something different as well. Along with the Quran, He sent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that his action, his sunnah, could exemplify for us the character that the Quran wants to build. And that's why we need a teacher. You cannot become a doctor by just reading any textbook. You need to learn from a teacher. You need to work as an unstudy. You need to go through training for a period of time, long period of time. If you look at it in a different way, when it comes to writing, you have the writer, you have the reader, and the medium between the two is the written word. So when it applies to Quran, it applies in both ways. Quran is a text that we have, but Quran is also kalamullah that we hear. How we interpret the text depends upon how the speaker or the writer speaks or writes, and what words are chosen. That's a very important thing. We'll talk about that. So when it comes to words, which is in Arabic you can say call. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used this word call with several adjectives in the Quran at several places. The most famous one is the one that we recite on every Friday, Khutbah, which is Ya Allazina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. We'll talk about this at length. But the other adjectives which are used in the Quran with respect to call are qawlan azima, qawlan baligha, qawlan ma'rufa, qawlan maysura, qawlan kalima. But there are different ways of speaking, there are different ways of addressing the people. When I'm talking to here in the Friday Khutbah, I cannot speak in a language that you people cannot understand. And I think this is one of the reasons why the scholars have allowed that Friday Khutbah can be given in a language that most people can understand. In Pakistan, if you go, Hanafi scholars will say, no, Khutbah will only be in Arabic language. But others have obviously allowed it, and I think it makes more sense. You also speak in a language that the audience can understand. And there is one statement which is actually weak hadith, Khatabun nasa ala qadri uqulihim. Talk to the people according to their intellectual level. There is something similar said by Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and there is something said by Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, which basically means that if you speak to the people in a way that it goes over their head, you will create fitna. And that happens. So when talking to the people, we have to keep it in mind. When you're talking to your parents, karima, honorable, respectable, show them respect. When you talk to somebody, you're trying to calm them down, maysura, make it easy for people. Qawlan baligha, fi anfusihim qawlan baligha. This is a very interesting verse related to the munafiqeen. The word baligh, balagha yablughu, you all Arabs know that. It means to reach. It also means to convey. Ballaghum anni walau ayah. The Prophet said, convey from me even if it is one ayah. Baligh also in the language of balagha rhetoric means something which is very eloquent. But baligh in that context is something which goes deep into the heart and soul of the listener. So he starts searching in himself. That's a very high level. I'm not at that level. So now we'll talk about the Qawlan Maysura, Qawlan Sadida. And Imam Qurtubi has given several opinions about it. He says, Qawlan Qasidan Haqqan Ghaira Batil. Qawlan Qasidan Ghaira Jaiz, Haqqan Ghaira Batil. Another meaning is Sidqan, another is Adlan, another Yani Bihi fi mintaqihi wa fi amalihi kulluhu, was Sadiq as Sidq. And Ikrama said, Qawlan Sadida means Qulu la ilaha illallah. Okay, what it means actually. I'll just quote a tafsir of the Quran, whose editor, one of the editors actually in our community, Professor Dawali, I don't think he's here today, he comes often. And they mentioned in explaining this verse from Surah Al-Azab, it also occurs in Surah Nisa, but Surah Al-Azab verse number 17, speak justly, enjoins testifying truthfully, speaking in a manner that is upright and free from any corruption, and speaking so that the outward locution, speaking, corresponds to the inward meaning. Many years ago, I actually gave a khutbah from here, and I talked about the most, what's the word that I use for? Untruthful professions. Okay. What are the most professions, what are the most people that you should never trust? So for today's khutbah, actually I went back and saw if there is any update, and there is an update from about a year ago. The people you should never trust, and it is online, you can vote. Congressmen, senators, car salesmen, insurance salesmen, stockbrokers, lawyers. Everybody. But basically anybody who is selling you anything is unreliable. And I'm talking more in terms of the congressmen and the senators, the people that we all support, the people we all vote for, and they all stab us in the back. You know, in the last 30 years that I have seen, it's my personal opinion, not from ICW. We voted for George W. Bush. Look what he did to us. We voted for Obama, what he did for us. We voted for Biden, and what he's doing to us. I'm not saying what you should do in the next election, that's up to you. It's a question of trust. Do you trust anyone? And the answer is really not trust anyone. But these are the people that you deal with every day. You buy your car, you get your insurance policy, You go and put your retirement money, you trust somebody to do business with. Don't. Okay? There is no call and sadida here. Now let's move to other way. The way the Quran, okay, let's talk about this thing. That usually mentioned that here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is connecting speech with action. And the divine forgiveness of human shortcomings and sin. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is after mentioning Quran says, Yusleh lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum. So if you guard your tongue, if your words and your thoughts and your actions are in accordance with the guidance of the Quran, that's fine. If you fall short, but if your intention is good, Allah will rectify your actions and Allah will forgive you. So the only thing if you want to take home from this khutbah is guard your speech. As the Prophet ﷺ has said that, give me the guarantee of two things and I will give you the guarantee of Jannah. The one that lies between your teeth, that's your tongue, and then one that lies between your legs, your shadow. And if you really cannot speak well, the Prophet ﷺ, فَلْيَسْمُتْ, be quiet, either speak good or be quiet. The art of speaking is the art of knowing when not to speak. Seems paradoxical, but if you look at this hadith, if you think that by speaking you will create more fitna, be quiet. If you think that by speaking you don't have enough knowledge and you may deceive somebody, don't speak. It's better to listen. That's why when I started this series of talks, the first talk was listening, not speaking. We all speak, we don't listen much. But once you have learned to listen, the idea is not to speak first. Try to understand what the other speaker is saying, and when you speak, speak with knowledge, speak with conviction, and that comes from Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to be his messenger, he was alone, at that point. His family was a little bit away. Had never been exposed to this kind of experience before, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam first came to him. And here is a shepherd who's being given a huge responsibility by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that responsibility, the first part was go and talk to Fir'aun, speak to Fir'aun. Oh Allah, how will I speak? I'm not a speaker. So what does he say? And look at the sequence. In Quran, when you read the verses of the Quran, always pay attention to the sequence. Because nothing in the Quran is disorganized. There is a reason why one thing comes and the next thing comes afterwards. So he said, Qala Rabbi shrah li sadri. First thing. Shahu sadr, number one. Second, wa yassir li amri. Open my heart. Make things easy for me. Number three, wahlul uqdatam min lisani. Loosen the knot in my tongue. And then yafqahu qawli. 4 steps. Very, very important thing. First thing that the speaker has to have an open heart. He has to be able to withstand criticism. He will receive persecution. People will hurl insults at him, subject him to misuse, abuse, call him names, whatever. But if he is sure that what he is saying is what Allah wants him to do, then he will withstand it. And I'm not going into the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, but you will see how he was firm when talking to Fir'aun, never losing his temper. So that's a very important thing. When you want to convey something, if your idea is to make it and not to break it, don't lose your temper. That's one thing. Second thing, وَيَسِّرْ لِأَمْرِي. It's a difficult task for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To speak, to convey the message of someone else's message, make it easy for me. It's a difficult task. And later on he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint Harun alayhi salatu wasalam as his wazir. Wazir from wizir. Wizir means weight or burden. So wazir is someone who shares your burden. He wants his right hand man, his own brother. Then wahlul uqdatam min lisani. It's an important thing. And there are many folklores about that there was some stammer in his tongue, there wasn't anything. It's to achieve a fluency of speech, to develop an ability that when you speak, people understand. You can bring yourself down to the level of your listeners so that your thoughts are conveyed to them in a manner that does not offend them, that they can understand, they can process it. So that's why I say, yafqahu qawli. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have simply said, ya'lamu qawli. They understand the meaning of my word. But he didn't say, ya'lamu qawli, yafqahu qawli. The process of knowledge starts with jahl, ignorance or lack of knowledge. Then it moves to ilm, knowing something. The next level is understanding. And tafaqquf is the deeper level of understanding. Man yuridullahu bihi khairan yufaqihuhu fid din. Whomsoever Allah wants to do good, He gives him a deeper understanding of religion. And a deeper understanding of religion, if you look at the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, when you go, qawlan layyina, speak to him lightly, politely. Okay? There was a conversation going on between two persons, and one raised his voice and the other said, you know, I'm not Fir'aun and you're not Musa. So talk to me like two brothers talk. So that's how we should be communicating with each other. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then mentioned, idhba ila fir'auna innahu tagha. Harun and Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, both go to Fir'aun. He has transgressed. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. And speak to them in a lenient way. Again, when you are trying to make something, when you're trying to achieve something good, your aim is constructive and not destructive. Your language has to be very kind, very mild, very polite, very respectful. You cannot achieve your objective by shouting at the other person, threatening them, talking about taking revenge from them if you come into power. It's not going to work. It will turn back against you. So the second part, we'll talk about how did the Prophet ﷺ talk and what advice did he give us about speaking. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولذكر الله أكبر. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. I think it's extremely important for every community, and especially the Muslim community living in America and the West, to train our younger generation how to communicate, how to be effective speakers. If we want our voice to be heard, the voice has to come from young men and women who have grown up here. They know the language, they know how to speak. Their accent is different from my accent. They look more impressive than I do. And they are our future. We need to invest in them. We need them to run for local offices, for state senator, for congressmen. We need lobbying. And actually, I forgot to mention, number one, most dishonest profession, number one is lobbyists. But they achieve their objective. That is a problem. Those who have strong lobbies in the Congress and Senate achieve their objective, even though they are lying to the people. I'm not saying that we train our young men and women to lie, but we want them to lobby for us by speaking qawlan sadida. Use your religion wisely, use your wisdom, but we need to train our young men and women to come and give khutbahs here. We need them to learn public speaking, and we need them to learn how to run for offices. Okay. So now the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, fala yu'zi jarahu, wa man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, falyukrim dayfahu, wa man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, falyaqul khairan aw liyasmut." You can give a khutbah on each one of these things. So first thing is that whoever believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment, he should not harm his neighbor. And neighbor doesn't mean only Muslim. Okay? There are different ways in which one can harm your neighbor. And I said one can give a khutbah on each one of them. Second thing is to honor your guests. The guests who come to your home, the guests who come to visit your masjid. Show them respect and they will respect you. And the last and the most important you can say is that whoever believes in Allah and the last day should speak only what is good, or he should remain silent. There is Arabic poetry that the wounds caused by arrows and spears will heal, but the wounds caused by tongue do not heal. So that language is extremely important, especially for us. We are living as a minority over here. Our words can be twisted, our words can be communicated and forwarded on Facebook and other media in a totally taken out of context. We need to be extremely careful when we are speaking publicly, when we are representing an Islamic school, a masjid, or Islamic community. Very important. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that Innal abda la yatakallamu bil kalimati ma yatabayyanu fiha yazillu biha ila an-nar abada mimma bayna al-mashriq wal maghrib. That one may utter a word thoughtlessly. So this is an important thing. When we talk, our thoughts have to be very organized. The words that we choose have to be extremely appropriate. So one may utter a word thoughtlessly, and as a result of this, he will fall down into hellfire for a distance greater than the distance between the east and the west. Another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that a person may utter a word pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without considering it of any significance. We may do something good, speak something good without even knowing, and because of it, Allah raises his ranks. Another verse from the Quran, Ma yalfidhu min qawlin illa ladayhi raqibun atid. A person does not utter a single word except there is somebody who is watching over him. So how did the Prophet ﷺ talk? So a hadith from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anhu is that she said that the Prophet ﷺ did not speak like you people speak and gossip. He will speak. Kana yatakallamu bi kalamin bayna faslin yatahaffazuhu man jalasa ilayhi. He will speak with pauses. He will not just keep talking non-stop. He will use pauses so that people could process what he's trying to say. In another case, the Prophet ﷺ, if there was something very important, he would repeat it 3 times. He wanted to make sure that people get what he's trying to say. Another important reason for that is that in those days people were not writing. The words of the Prophet ﷺ could have been lost. So the fact that he repeated important things 3 times, or that people would memorize and go and tell their own family members or tell their other friends about it. And we have a hadith in Bukhari where Umar radiallahu ta'ala mentioned that he used to live some distance from the Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he couldn't go for Isha or Maghrib prayer every day. But he said, my neighbor and I would take turns. So one day I will go, and whatever I have learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I communicate it to my neighbor. The next day my neighbor would go, and then he will come back and tell me what he learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they used to learn, they used to memorize those things, and people question, hadith was not written for 200 years. No, this is not true. The Sahaba used to memorize it and communicate to each other, and they passed it down to their children and their grandchildren. We have those hadith that a person narrated from his father who narrated from his grandfather. So we have all of those things already written down. The Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala also mentioned that the Prophet said, Innama buistu be jawami'il kalim, that I have been sent down with the ability to speak in a very comprehensive manner. Jawami'il kalim will be that in few words you can communicate a lot of things. Sometimes you hear a 1-hour speech from a congressman or a senator or president or whoever, and you really don't get anything out of it. On the other hand, a person may say one verse and give a short explanation, like we do khatiras, We stopped doing Khutbah in Ramadan. I'm very upset about it, but anyway, we used to do it after 8th rakat. Choose one verse or two verses from what is being recited and give a 2-3 minute explanation of that. We listen to the 20 rakat, 8 rakat, whatever it is, one juz of the Quran. How much do we carry with us? That was the purpose of the Khatira. And we still do that in other masajid. We stopped doing it, no interest. Learning is very important, Just listening is not important enough. What are you listening to the Quran? What are you taking home? What did you learn today after standing 1 hour in the masjid for 20 rakat or 8 rakat? Ask yourself. Even if you are an Arab, is how you understand it. The Prophet also, Kana idha takallama bi kalimatin a'adaha thalatha hatta yufhamu anhu wa idha ata ala qawmin fasallama alayhim sallama thalatha. 3 times. So whenever the Prophet said something, he would speak it 3 times so that it would be understood well. And when he approached people, when he came to people, he will give them salam 3 times. So in order to have the best speech, the first thing we need is a grip on our emotions, as I mentioned. Rabbi shrah li sadri. That you will not get offended, you will not start shouting. Not in the sense that we have no feelings. We all have feelings. But when we are provoked, we do not react with anger. The Prophet ﷺ would always repel the bad with good, and we need to do the same. Some people find it easier than others to remain calm. But as anything in life, we need to train ourselves. Everything has to be learned. And it's called ta'deeb in Arabic language. Always consider what the Prophet ﷺ would say in that situation. Imagine if the Prophet ﷺ was in your situation, how would he respond? Definitely not like me or you when we get upset. His response would be wise. So let's copy him and elevate ourselves by following his example. Next, to speak clearly, not too fast and not too slow. People will be bored. So it has to be spoken with, concisely. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ would to do. And we need to learn to speak like this. If you speak too fast, remember to breathe, to pause, as the Aisha radiallahu anha hadith mentioned. To speak more slowly, not too slowly, but simply at a pace that people will be able to understand. Like in this audience here, there are people who may think I'm speaking too slowly. There are some who may think that I'm speaking too fast. How do I train myself? By pausing, giving break, using words which can be understood by everybody. Sometimes repeating it, that happens. So the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha was trying to find the messenger of Allah did not speak quickly like you do now. Rather, he would speak so clearly, unmistakably, that those who sat with him would memorize it. In another hadith from Abu Dawud, when the Prophet ﷺ gave a talk, a man could count his words if he used to count. So that's why we have hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which are recorded exactly as he spoke, because he gave time for people to understand. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to speak the way the Prophet ﷺ spoke, to say whatever we want to say with love, compassion, and respect. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. We are still collecting money for the people who are suffering in Gaza, so please donate generously. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة.